All right, you guys, I have my beautiful strawberry glass here, and we are diving in and talking about unhealthy relationships. If you haven't already checked out the podcast directory, I would highly recommend doing so that you can jump to the episodes that you need to binge ASAP for what you need help with. And for the sake of October being the Domestic Violence Awareness Month, I figured that with all of what will be coming out in the media and everything at the same time, it could be really helpful for you guys to have like a Monica podcast episode on not just domestic violence, but just unhealthy relationships. Because violence isn't just physical, it's also mental and emotional at the same time. Or not at the same time, it can be at the same time, but it can also be mental and emotional. And we can also be, I feel like violence is the wrong word for this, but we can also be quote unquote violent, for want of a better word, towards ourselves when we are trying to heal from being in an unhealthy relationship. So let's start with this as a really important thing. I am going to, for the sake of today's episode, use men as the one, like when I give examples, I'm going to say he and men for the ones that are causing the quote unquote violence, and women that are the quote unquote victims to the violence. However, men are also, I don't actually love using the word victims, not because I'm trying to gaslight that you may feel like a victim of violence. And obviously there is a spectrum to what we're talking about of how unhealthy a relationship can be and how bad it can be, but more so because language has power. And if you're always telling yourself, I was a victim of sexual abuse, I was a victim of domestic abuse, I was a victim of blah, blah, blah. I kind of touch on this in my book when I share a very little bit about my own story, or rather why I didn't share my own experience with this. So you can go and read that if you want to in my book, Becoming Her. But the reason why is not to say that that experience didn't happen to you. It's to say that if you are always telling yourself that you were a victim of this, is that empowering you to heal from it, to gain control over it, to feel like it is no longer running the show? No, it's not. The labels that we put on ourselves can be detrimental to our growth. And if you are listening to this episode, you care about your growth. Or not even this episode, this podcast, you care about your growth. So be very careful of the labels that you use for yourself if you do not want your past to continue to be your future. So men can also be and are also victims of abuse, sexual, physical, mental, emotional. And it's sad because a lot of the times these conversations around unhealthy relationships, let's just say it as that for today, because there's a spectrum of what we're talking about. We often immediately go, women are the victims of unhealthy relationships. And yes, statistically, there is a bigger proportion of women that are subject to this. We often forget about the very real cases and the very real realities of men being raped, men having sexual abuse, boys being molested, not to get like too dark at the beginning of the episode, men and boys being violated physically, mentally, emotionally, women being extremely abusive to their husbands. And often that really gets forgotten because we think, like unconsciously, we think like, oh, men can't be victims of women abusing them, but actually they can. They can, and it's a very real reality. So I want to leave that there just so that we can remember that men have a part in this conversation and to not exclude them. But also so that you know, as we go in, for the sake of examples, I'm going to use women are the victims, men are the perpetrators. But that doesn't mean that's actually always the case. I'm just talking about it for today because the majority of you listening are women. But we do have men listening, so I see you guys as well. Okay, so the first thing, when we are in an unhealthy relationship, for the most part, unless you've done a pile of healing work, which I'm not talking to you if you have, if you've done a pile of healing work and you've gotten into an unhealthy relationship, you're still going to get a lot out of this episode. But I'm talking to those of you that haven't healed all of your trauma or most of it, and you are finding yourself starting to become aware of like, I seem to have this really intense pattern where I'm always dating the wrong kind of guys, Or maybe you've just come out of an unhealthy relationship and maybe you're like, what the heck? How did I not see that? You need to listen to this episode. We will not even realize, for the most part, when we are in a really unhealthy or the extreme abusive situation or relationship, because our nervous system is so used to it. That feeling of not feeling safe, of chaos, of not being loved, of being manipulated, of being gaslit, of being made to feel like we're not worthy, those feelings are familiar to your nervous system because that is what you grew up with. And we are mimicking what we grew up with because, as I'm always telling you guys, it's not about what you know you want in a relationship. It's about what your nervous system and your body deems as familiar. What your nervous system and body deems as familiar, it deems as safe. So even if it's not safe, so if to you it is familiar to be with a man, here's an example, a man that is mentally abusing you or manipulating you and gaslighting you all the time. We're not talking about just like, the human moments. I don't mean the human moments of hitting. There's no like allowance for hitting anywhere in a relationship. I mean the human moments of like accidentally gaslighting you or accidentally making you feel guilty. I'm not talking about that. Okay. I'm talking about the constant manipulation, constant gaslighting, constantly feeling like you are being put down by your partner. If you've grown up in a situation very familiar to that, then you are going to very often end up in relationships like that because they are familiar to your body. If you went and started dating a really healthy guy that was like really nice to you and always showed up on time, and like if you blew your lid about something, he would have a very level-headed conversation with you. You'd be like, this guy is fucking weird. You wouldn't even be dating him. Put it that way. You wouldn't be dating him because actually he feels unsafe to your body because it is so unfamiliar. Many of us can relate to it in the sense of like when we're dating or when we were younger, maybe if not now, when you're dating the really boring guy and you're like, oh my God, he's so boring. And you keep dating these bad guys that always hurt you and ghost you and like abandon you and are cheating on you. It's not because they're better men, because they're obviously not. And it's not because the initial guy was actually boring. It's because to your nervous system, he seems boring because he's not throwing you on the roller coaster all the time. We're going to talk about trauma bonds today as well, so hang with me for that. But of course, there are situations, ladies, where you might have grown up in a pretty healthy environment. Maybe your parents are still together, they really loved you, you never saw like anyone getting hurt physically, mentally, emotionally, but all of a sudden you're like, how the hell did I end up in this situation? And there are many reasons for it. Okay, so we're not going to go through all the reasons for it. But what I want to say to those of you that are like, how did this happen? And you are shaming yourself, you are beating yourself up, you are thinking that you're stupid for staying. Women aren't stupid for staying in these unhealthy relationships. We're not stupid. I kind of talked about this. I know I did talk about this when I did the episode for the movie. What was that movie where Blake Lively was in and it had the domestic abuse situation? Whatever that movie was. I broke that down because it's so easy from a third party perspective, or even from once you're outside of a relationship that you were in and you've ended that relationship and you're back to safety. It's so easy to look from the outside in and go, why did I stay in that? Or why is she staying in that? But I have worked with enough women that are in these situations, and I understand these situations and trauma well enough to know that the reason why is because, one, their nervous system is simply repeating what it thinks is safe, even if cognizantly and consciously we know that it's not safe, because that abuse often mirrors childhood patterns, but also because once you are in those relationships and you have your rose-colored glasses on, you might not see it, especially if there's love bombing at the beginning. You might not actually see the love bombing. And then all of a sudden you're in this relationship. And then things can get so unhealthy that you're actually then scared to leave. And that fear of leaving is a very, very, very real fear. Even though you and I might think, just leave. No, it is not as simple as just leave. Maybe he's the one keeping the roof over your head. Maybe you're afraid that if you leave, things could get even worse. Or the real kicker that a lot of women do that are not aware of is they are remembering the highs of the roller coaster, not the lows. So they're in this trauma bond, right? where they're on this constant roller coaster. And when things are down in the relationship, and, you know, down is subjective, when things are down in the relationship, they are talking themselves out of how bad things are. They are giving their partner excuses because they do love him to an extent, right? It might not be healthy love, but it's still love. It still to them feels like love, or it still to you feels like love. So you're giving your partner excuses. And the reason why we also give our partner excuses, even if you're not in a fully abusive situation, but you're in an unhealthy relationship, or there are just some unhealthy dynamics in a relationship, the reason why we give our partner excuses is because we are afraid to fully stand in our self-worth. We are lacking the self-respect and the self-commitment that is required to continuously pursue a healthy relationship, even once you're in it, where you are not brushing things under the carpet. You are not just like, oh, all right, whatever, just like blowing it off, because those things end up building up over time. You are not afraid, because of your self-worth and your self-respect, to stand up for yourself. But what happens is that when you're riding that low, you're giving him excuses. You're reasoning with your mind to make yourself feel better about the situation. And then when the high comes back and you're riding the high and he's apologizing, or he's buying you flowers, or he's, you know, you've had a really nice day together, you're like, see? And so then what happens is you forget the negatives. This is what happens when you then start to get it's almost like a dopamine addiction. You're addicted to these highs and you forget how painful it feels when you are at the low. Right? And biology designs us this way, right? We don't want to be remembering when we are feeling negative all the time. It's like when I look back, for example, on even lockdown, or on some of my I'll use a relationship example. Geez, when I look back on some of my relationships, I'm like, oh, wasn't that bad, bitch. Like, I'll give you an example. I've never actually aired this example on my podcast. Here's an example. The reason why I thought about this is because I recently did an Instagram post actually, where it was like my 8-year transformation or something or other. And I showed pictures from when I was in the dumps, let's just say, and I had my jaw surgery and I was premenopausal at the age of, like, how old was I? 20, 19, because I lost my period. And then I showed the now. So it was before I had my jaw surgery, and I met this guy, and it was like my first, what I thought was love. Now I'm like, bitch, that wasn't love. What I thought was love. We became ski instructors together when we were living in, where were we? Oh my God. Whistler. Whistler is the name. We were in Whistler. And we both were becoming ski instructors together. Long story short, we like fell in love, whatever. And we were dating and it was all very nice. And then I was traveling for a bit after, and he was British, or is British if he's still alive, because like I do not know. Which I know sounds so morbid, but like not in a morbid way, just like I'm not connected with him in any way, shape or form. Anyway, and you know, I think we connected, I can't even remember. We like connected maybe again, saw each other for a bit. Yes, we did, because I went and met his family and whatnot in outside of London, and everything was great, la la la. Long story short, I'm like so upset when I'm leaving London to go back to Australia, so heartbroken. It was the first time I experienced like heartbreak and that feeling of like the physical pain in your heart, whatever. We go back to, oh my God, this was so fucking bad. Oh my God, it's about time I share this one with you guys, just so you can also know. And this is not an abusive relationship, by the way. I'm just telling you, like, we've all been there. I've by no means been perfect from the get-go with relationships, but like, when I look back, and now I'm obviously aware of this, but like prior to me having done the work, when I would look back, and this is a perfect example of me looking back and then doing something really fucking dumb, I'm like, everything's so roses and butterflies and how he treated me and la la la. No, it was absolutely not roses and butterflies, especially because he was a few years older than me. So like absolutely should have known better. Anyway, I'm so heartbroken. I'm living in Melbourne at the time, like whatever, like doing my thing at university, and I end up, I really wanted him to come to the races. Those of you that are Australian, you get it. In Melbourne, we have horse races every year, and it's like a full thing, and my family did it, and it was really fun, and we would like do it with other families, and it was a really fun time. We would like have a little spot for the races, whatever. And the only person that I wanted to invite was him. Like, I so badly wanted him. So my parents, being lovely parents, used a bunch of their airline points Hopefully they don't mind me sharing this. I don't think they'll really care, but whatever. It's a long time ago. And they flew him over. No, this man should have, if he really, not even this man, I should have 100% when I said that I would love for him to come, I should have not let my parents be the one to bring him over. He needed to find the money, to get resourceful, to be a man, not in a masculine way. I just mean like be a man, be a provider, be a protector, and actually come over. And if he didn't want to, I needed to see that, which I did not see, and be in my self-worth and in my value and in self-respect, which I absolutely was not at the time. And I needed to see he just didn't like me enough or love me enough. He just didn't. But I didn't see that. And I didn't see all the times prior to that where he really was not showing up in the way that he should have shown up, and in a healthy way and in a supportive way and in a loving way. But of course, I gave him the benefit of the doubt. I excused his behavior. And yes, there is always room for giving the benefit of the doubt in a healthy relationship, because after all, we are human. We are not perfect. And there is compromise in a relationship, and there is misunderstanding. And so benefit of the doubt is important. But I wasn't just giving the benefit of the doubt. I was excusing his behavior, not once, not twice, but time and time again. So then he comes to Melbourne, and he is, I actually did end up kicking him out. So like, I will say, spoiler, the worth came through, but I think it actually more came through as anger, if I remember correctly. And I do remember like sending him home once I found this out of the spoiler of the thing that I'm about to tell you guys. I really cannot believe this. Oh my God. I remember exactly where I was. So he was staying with us, and he didn't want to sleep in the bed with me, which should have been a fucking telltale sign. Whatever the word is. That should have been a telltale sign. And it wasn't. I still was excusing his behavior, because this is what a lot of us do. Long story short, he was out somewhere or something or other, and he left his laptop open. Dumb. No. He didn't leave his laptop open. That's right. He left my laptop open that he was borrowing, and he'd logged into Facebook. This is back when you would message your friends on Facebook, and it was, his Facebook was up, and guess what message popped up? It was from his brother, I'm pretty sure. And basically he was saying how he really enjoyed just like boffing off me and my family. And that he was complaining about me with something. I can't remember what exactly he was complaining about me with. I think it was something to do with me wanting to like be with him romantically and him not wanting to. And then it was either his brother or a friend that messaged him back and was like, just buy her a piece of jewelry or something to just shut her up. And once I saw this, then I remember kicking him out and being like, you need to get home. And he had to find his own money to get his way home. But then even after that relationship, what do you know? You keep dating the wrong guys. You and I listening to this, if you have done the work, you're probably thinking, oh, she learned after that one. No, of course she didn't, because I didn't know where this was actually coming from. I didn't know that the pattern that I was repeating was actually more about me than it was about quote unquote men. It's not that men are violent. It's not that men are abusive. It's not that men are unhealthy and blah, blah, blah. It was what I was allowing in my relationships. But here's the thing. You have to catch that shit so early on. Once you are deep in especially the more intense abusive relationships, like this was not an abusive relationship. It was unhealthy, but it wasn't abusive by any means. Once you're in those abusive relationships, it becomes even harder to see a way out. And that's why for those of you that maybe are holding on to shame on your past self, or you haven't forgiven your past self for being in unhealthy relationships or for being in really, really abusive situations even, I want to give you permission right now to forgive yourself, because you can't see what others see necessarily. You are being blindsided, especially if you stayed in the relationship for a long time where your confidence has been worn down, your intuition non-existent anymore, your sense of self barely there. I want you to forgive yourself. Some of you might have been seeing that I am posting on Instagram the herbs that I have been taking for postpartum, but I was also taking them to help with fertility before we conceived, and we did conceive on the first try. And I've been taking them a while for my adrenals, for my gut. I am such a fan of herbalism. You guys know that about me, like TCM, herbalism, it's like so up my alley. Anyway, one of my friends, Paul, he has an incredible business called PK's, and the herbalist, he's a herbalist for it, makes these incredible herb blends, tinctures is what you would call it actually, tinctures for all sorts of different things. Whether you're struggling with adrenal fatigue, then you're going to want to get the Wake Me Dead is what it's called. His names are really quirky because like he's really quirky and a really funny guy. So it fits. Blood bank is also really good, especially if you've just given birth. You can have it on hand. So before you even give birth, I had blood bank on hand. Blood bank's also really good if you have a light period or a really heavy period, or have gone through any kind of like accident where you've lost a lot of blood or surgery. Blood banks also, they're really good for energy. There's a ton. You also can get ones for fertility for women and then also ones for men. And there's also the lactation one that I'm currently using right now called Yummy Mummy. So my code is Monica20 and that will get you 20% off. I don't think they ship outside. They do not ship outside the US. So for anybody in the US, I would highly, highly, highly recommend getting PKs for any herbs and use the code Monica20. And if you're coming to one of my events in the US, then whilst you're here, order a bunch and then you could take them back to wherever you live. And I also want you to forgive yourself if what you're doing, having left the relationship, or maybe maybe you left the relationship years ago, or you left it just weeks ago, if you are catching yourself playing over the good times and you think that you miss the relationship, you think you miss the person, you don't miss the relationship or miss the person. You miss that feeling of familiarity, right? You miss the adrenaline rush of the highs and the lows. But none of that is healthy. You're remembering the good times over the bad. And yeah, you miss those good times, of course. But what you need to understand is that it actually really takes a lot of mental effort and a mental work to remind yourself over and over and over again of what was unhealthy in that relationship and what you actually deserve. And this isn't about being entitled and saying you deserve stuff that's just like you're asking for a perfect human that like you're not going to have. This isn't about being entitled. This is about realizing that if you have been in, or if you are in a really unhealthy relationship, you're missing fundamental core things of a healthy relationship. And that is what you deserve to have. You deserve to have respect. You deserve to be spoken to nicely. You deserve to have regulated conversations. You deserve to have your emotions met. You deserve to feel seen and feel heard. You deserve to, I mean, I could go on and on and on, but if you have listened to those, it's like they are basic needs. I'm not saying you deserve to have flowers brought home to you every day. Like, yeah, of course, yeah, you deserve flowers, but we're not even talking about that. The stepping stone is firstly realizing the fundamental components of a healthy relationship and how that was not happening in this previous relationship, or it was only happening once in a blue moon, and this needs to happen all the time. Some of you might have heard Stockholm Syndrome. Stockholm Syndrome is like an extreme form of a trauma bond, right? We'll often refer to Stockholm Syndrome in like kidnappings, for example, where, someone's gotten kidnapped and all of a sudden they've like befriended their abuser, their kidnapper, that kind of thing. It can happen in abusive relationships, but I want us to use the concept of it just as an example. If we had like a spectrum of abusive relationships, I want you to use it as an example or as kind of like a concept for all sorts of abusive relationships, where with Stockholm Syndrome, what happens is you end up believing your abuser, and it's almost kind of like you're under their spell, if that makes sense. And you basically become bonded with your abuser. That's what Stockholm Syndrome is, right? But you become bonded because of the trauma. You're not becoming bonded because of actual love. It's a survival mechanism is what it is. So many of us have done this within, different forms, obviously some very minor and some more extreme, where instead of actually validating our experience in a relationship, we are listening more to the other person And we end up falling in love or being bonded over those highs and lows, over the abuse, right? Your brain is forgetting the bad moments and you're always focusing on the good moments. And you tell yourself what you need to hear in order to stay alive, quote unquote. And that stay alive, obviously, in extreme cases, is literally about staying alive. And in more minor cases, is about staying alive in the sense of, for example, you would have a lot of shame if you left the relationship because what would people think? You're too worried about that, of what would people think, or I don't want to fail, or my parents would think less of me if I left this marriage, instead of actually honoring what you need. Maybe this episode is just a wake up call for some of you of like, wow, I haven't even been honoring what I need in my relationship. I've really just been putting myself last, putting my needs last, because I don't want to rock the boat, because I don't want the relationship to end. No, I don't want your relationship to end either if it's a good relationship, but can it turn into a healthy relationship or not? That takes two people. However, that takes two people, and I'm going to say and, not however. How you show up in the relationship and what you're tolerating is a really big component to the health of the relationship, of course. So if you're continuing to allow unhealthy behavior, then you're going to continue to allow unhealthy behavior. One of my clients, for example, she's a past client and she was in a very, very unhealthy relationship. And what would happen, and now this wasn't to the point of severe abuse where her life was on the line, but it was extremely manipulative. It was extremely, I almost want to say like misogynistic, like he was. And it was there was a lot of gaslighting, a lot of manipulation, a lot of emotional and mental abuse. And this programming had come from her childhood and her parents that she had a very, very rough upbringing. And as an example, one of the things that would cause her to go one step forward in her self-worth in the relationship and then two steps back was she would try to draw a boundary. She would try to show up with integrity for herself as an example, or draw a boundary with her husband. And then when he would like not honor the boundary or not follow through with what she asked, or, say something really mean to her, for example, instead of following through with the boundary that she had drawn for him and or for herself, she wouldn't follow through with the boundary. And so what happened is then over time, he continued to be able to learn that when she says, like, if you're not home by this time, and I'm saying this some ultimatum, not because it's the first time she said this. This is like, we're talking a very healthy relationship, right? When she says to him, if you're not home by this time that you have promised me time and time and time and time again, I am leaving you because I do not feel respected by you. And I do not feel like my time, as an example, is respected by you. And when she says that, and then he doesn't arrive home and she wants to absolutely flip her lid, and then she does, and he quote unquote apologizes, and then it happens again and again. Why is it happening again and again? Because she didn't say what she said she was going to, she didn't do, what she said she was going to do. So he learns that he can keep walking all over her. And this is often what happens in abusive relationships. The common abusive relationships, again, I'm not talking like life or death. That's a different situation, but I want to talk about the stuff that's serving the most of you in this conversation. That happens even when men are the ones being abused in a relationship. We allow someone to cross our boundary. We don't follow through with our word, and we teach the other person that they can continue to show up in this kind of way in the relationship and walk all over us because we're just going to keep saying words that actually don't mean anything, that we're actually not going to take action on. And you got to remember, hurt people, right? So when you have an abusive relationship, let's say that, your boyfriend was the one that was abusive towards you, whether it's physical, mental, emotional. This is a general comment, but this is 99% of cases. He's not necessarily in his core, in his heart, a bad person. Him responding to you, reacting to you, being mean to you in this kind of way is because of his own trauma. It could also be if you were the one obviously abusing him and you were both abusing each other, so that can happen, right? If you're both abusing each other, he can be showing up like that because of the way that you're showing up towards him too. So we got to remember that like it takes two to tango in that sense too. It also takes two to tango in the sense of if he's being really mean to you and you're tolerating it, then what's the environment? His nervous system continues to learn that when I'm upset, when I'm pissed off, when I don't feel seen, I can just be really, really mean to her and then I feel better about myself. And obviously it's better in his ego, not his heart kind of thing. He gets an illusion of feeling better about himself. And because you don't do anything, that cycle is able to continue. But let's come back to what I've said before of it's really hard when you're in these moments to sometimes do something about them or to even recognize them. I've shared this in an episode before, the episode that I did about is he really a narcissist? Because people also throw this word around a lot on the internet. People throw around narcissist, he's gaslighting me, he's this, he's that, blah, blah, blah. And what it does is one, it actually takes away from the actual narcissistic relationships that people are struggling with. But number two is that a lot of us are aiming for perfection in our relationship. And I talk about this in her year in the relationship modules of like, there will be times sometimes where you have actually gaslit your partner, where you have actually manipulated your partner or guilt tripped your partner. Do you mean it? No, you don't mean it. I mean, I hope not. And there are times when he might accidentally gaslight you or manipulate you or guilt trip you or be mean to you. And does he mean it? Is he meaning to gaslight you? No. Right? We're human. We are not robots. But when you are actually in a narcissistic relationship, it can be very hard to see. So I was a few years ago in a friendship with a guy that, look, it was a friendship, a situationship. It was a mess ship is what it was. I'm not even going to go into the fucking details because it's just not even worth the energy. But anyway, and it turns out he was actually a narcissist. Did I know it when I was in it? No. I didn't really know it until the very, very end of that relationship when things became so clear. But I'll give you examples, right? It's like, didn't bring my wallet to dinner, makes up some excuse and guilt trips me into buying dinner. Okay, fine, whatever. I'm a friend. I'll buy dinner the first time. And then doesn't pay me back. And then it happens again. It's, coming to an event with me because, I've invited him to come to an event with me, blah, blah, blah. And then not paying for anything and making up these excuses and me just kind of being confused by it, right? But am I honoring my boundary? No. I'm like, okay, I'm making excuses for his behavior because I'm not seeing it. Because the thing with, for example, true narcissist personality disorder is that they are they do it in this way that is so nice and so smooth and suave that you don't actually recognize what's happening. Because you're like, oh, they're so nice, they're so polite, they're so this, they're so that. But really, it's always about actually just getting what they want. So like when I would catch up with him, it was never about me. It was never a question about me. It was never actually, how can I help me? How could he help me? What's going on with me? How are you? Like, let me buy you dinner this time. Like like friends, you take it in turn. It was never about that. It was always about him. And I always had to be at his beck and call when he needed me. But if I needed support, if I needed help, if it didn't suit him, then it didn't suit him. Right. And then it was the lies upon lies. Like as an example, I was having a Halloween party and that's right. This is when things started to really unravel because I had a Halloween party and he couldn't end up coming last minute or something or other. I can't remember the full details. And again, I was really bummed, but I excused the behavior. All right, fine. And then it wasn't until my friend that I mentioned before, Stacy, she lives in New York, we were talking and I said something very off the cuff. We were having a meal in a really good Greek restaurant in New York. of like, oh yeah, and like, apparently what a bummer that, because we both knew this guy. I met Stacey through him. So, there was a reason why he was in my life, but like, oh, what a bummer. Like he couldn't come to Halloween thing. And she was like, wait, he was with me on Halloween. That is when things started to unravel, only because somebody else that I mentioned something to made me aware of the lies and the lies and the lies that continued to go on and on. And then when I would call him out in the lie, right, it was then put back on me. And then I am like feeling bad, like, oh, I shouldn't say that. I'm so sorry, but like, what the fuck? And I want to share this with you guys. If you've heard it before, like, sorry for the repeat, but it was a while ago in an episode. The reason why I'm sharing this with you is because I'm living in New York in 2021. I have done the work. I am dating men that, if they're not showing up and meeting me where I'm at and paying for dates and they have self-respect and they got their shit together, I'm not dating them, right? When I say that I like had my shit together, I had my shit together. I wasn't chasing men. I wasn't needing their validation. I had done that healing work. And yet I had fallen into the trap of this kind of behavior because it can happen so subtly over a period of time. And if you're a good person, like I am a good person, I see the best in people. And if you're anything like me, where I'm always seeing the best in people, it actually can be to my detriment. And I've had this happen quite a lot in my life, if I'm honest, where I excuse people's behavior, whether it's a girl that I'm friends with, or I say a woman that I'm friends with, whether it's an employee, whether it's someone that I'm dating, whether it's this dude that's actually behaving in an incredibly unhealthy way towards me. I excuse behavior because I see the best in people rather than seeing point blank the truth and the facts of what is happening in front of me. And so that is something that I really learned through that experience of I need to sometimes take my emotions out of relationships and see the facts and then combine and anchor in the facts with my really deep self-worth and commitment to my own self-respect. Because if I am really committed to my self-respect and I look at the facts of the situation, I'm like, absolutely not. And I can walk away. And it took me, because even, like, I'm so sorry. Like, and then he would kind of like pull me back in and then I would, whatever. You know what it took for me to literally block this dude's number because I was like, stop contacting me. And like, I am completely cutting you out of my life forever. You know what it actually took? It took me phoning him one day to be like, hey, I'm trying to get, because I met him in London when I was living in London during COVID. And then I moved to New York and then he moved to New York. We're probably getting the gist of like, oh, that's interesting. Okay. So, I called him one day because I was like, I'm trying to get all of my stuff that was in storage. And this is me thinking he's being so nice and helpful. Wait for it. He moved everything out of my storage unit when he was living in London still a few months after I'd gotten to New York, which I thought, oh my God, that's so kind. Instead of being like, actually, no, leave it in the fucking storage unit. Like, I'll deal with it. He moves it all and he gets it all into his dad's house outside of London. And I'm thinking, that's so nice. I don't have to pay rent on this storage unit anymore. So then I phone him being like, hey, I want to sell all my stuff from that was in like the storage unit. Like, I'm not going back to London. I just need to sell everything. There was a lot of expensive stuff in there of like, cookware and like a new desk that was like, oh my God, this pissed me off so much. A new desk that was like $2,000 that I had used for 1 week because all the shipments of furniture was just delayed. I used it for 1 week before I left. And he said, oh, I gave it to friends. I gave everything away. Yeah. Mic drop with that one. And that was when I just, when somebody says something that you like don't even know how to respond with because you're like so far, like you're so flabbergasted that you're actually like, how is it possible for a human to be this shit? That was me. And so that was the end of that. And that was also such a big wake up call and such a reminder for me and for you, which is why I'm sharing this and why I've shared it before, that even when you've done all this work on yourself, it can still happen. It can still happen. And so coming back to, doesn't matter. Don't blame yourself. Don't, oh my God, if I was this, then this wouldn't have happened. If I healed this, then this wouldn't have happened. Maybe, of course, maybe. Because to an extent, when we're talking about not so much narcissistic relationships, because that happens so subtly, and it's a bit different in the way that it feels in the beginning. But when your nervous system is wired for being talked down to, for being manipulated, for feeling like your needs don't matter, for being verbally abused, emotionally abused, for being ghosted in a relationship and then they come back, for all of that roller coaster, when your nervous system is used to that, then you don't see the problem until you see the problem. So if you've taken anything away from this episode, I want you to give yourself permission to forgive your past self and, as an action step, reflect on your unhealthy relationships for me. What did you not see in the beginning that you are now committed to seeing going forward? This does not mean that you show up with entitlement in your dating experience. It means that you show up with self-respect in your dating experience. That is the energy. You are showing up as the high value woman that you are. And of course, yes, if you have not done any trauma healing, then you are absolutely doing that to prevent you from getting into these situations, but also so that when life happens, even in a healthy relationship, you can navigate hardship. You can navigate challenging moments. You can make sure that you are showing up as a healthy partner in a relationship, because we are very quick to always point blame to the other person. And maybe it is the other person's fault, but it's really healthy to also look at and not self-blame. That's different. But was there a part to play that I had in it? Not self-blame, but it could simply be the part to play was, what did you allow? The part to play could be that, I didn't trust my intuition. Doesn't mean self-blame. Take it as information. You're using it for the next dating experience. We're not blaming ourselves. We're just using it as information. And the last thing that I want to loop back in, because this is really important for all sorts of, relationships, whether it's a little bit on the unhealthy spectrum or way on the unhealthy spectrum, is really looping back with what I said about the dopamine addiction, where you can get really addicted to riding the highs of the relationships, that you brush the lows under the carpet. And slowly and slowly and slowly over time, you lose your voice in the relationship. You lose yourself. You lose your boundaries. You lose self-integrity. You lose your sense of health. You lose your confidence. You lose your self-worth. You lose your self-independence. You lose everything. Slowly, though, over time. And so this is something that you need to do even in healthy relationships, right? I do it in a sense with Hal and I. I'm very mindful of that. Hal has shared before in Q&As in person at my 3-day immersion. For those of you coming to Atlanta, so excited. You have no idea what's in store for you. Well, you do have an idea, but it's better than you can possibly imagine. So excited. Anyway, you guys can even ask him about this if you want to. We do a Q&A with him, and we're going to do an even longer one this year as well for the Atlanta one. I've factored in way more time because every year it's just like women just want more. I'm like, we could spend the whole last day, honestly, just doing a Q&A. So I factored in extra time this year, so everyone's happy with that. And so we feel like we actually really get it. Anyway, and so he shared before that his previous long-term relationship was extremely unhealthy and extremely toxic. And so I have been, and he's shared this, so I know I have permission to share it because he shared it publicly with, you guys in Q&As if you've been to my immersion before or the like, that when it comes to who's more regulated, I'm more regulated. And it's meant that in moments of, friction or heat or an argument or something like that, or just an intense conversation, is that I'm able to stay really, really grounded. And it's helped his nervous system to mirror that. So over time, what it's meant is that he has learned that he doesn't need to fight in arguments or react or, just behave in the way that he used to have to feel heard in his previous relationship. So do not underestimate, ladies, the power of you doing your healing work and how it also impacts the way that your partner shows up and heals from their past relationships. Because the mirroring of nervous systems is really real in relationships. And obviously, to an extent, right? We all know. I think we've kind of gotten the gist with this episode. And when you say, no, it's my man, it's my partner that's the problem in the relationship, let me just tell you right now, that kind of attitude from the get-go is not the attitude for a healthy relationship. Because yes, maybe his reactions in heated moments or the way that he kind of like snaps at you sometimes or whatever it is, yeah, that's a him thing, okay? However, is there potentially a better way for you to communicate? Maybe not. I'm just being devil's advocate. Maybe not. But there could be. Is there a way that you could stay more regulated? Probably in a conversation so he could stay more regulated. Or even more importantly, which is the whole dopamine thing that I was getting to, so I need to come back to this because it's important. Or are you riding the dopamine high waves and getting addicted to that? And so, for example, let's just say after every argument, you guys have sex because that's a pattern that he picked up in a past relationship. And so then what happens is both of you learn in order to have hot sex, let's just say, you have to have an argument. Or having an argument is fine because we'll just make up with it with sex. But have you actually gotten on the same page from the disagreement and fully understood each other? Or have actually you think that it's been solved by sex, aka dopamine, but actually that low has not been solved. But you think it's been solved because it's been covered by a high. This can happen not just with sex. You have a really, really horrible fight and he's really mean to you and says all these nasty things the day before, okay? You go to bed crying, you're so upset, you're like, oh my God, I want to, leave this relationship. I hate this. Like, what do I do? Or you're just blaming yourself because your self-worth is so fucking down the drain. Your self-confidence is non-existent anymore. Maybe anymore, or maybe it was to begin with, and we need to work on that too. And that low self-confidence also meant that you did pick a man that also validated for your brain and your ego and your subconscious, that validated that you are not worthy. That's a whole thing too. We can't forget that. So maybe you picked the wrong guy because of how you think about yourself and you don't think that you deserve a healthy relationship, whatever it is. He's been awful to you. You've gone to bed and you're like, that's it. I can't do this anymore. Or like, I'm so bad. I can't believe I made him feel this way, blah, blah, blah. And then the next morning he's making you breakfast in bed, blah, blah, blah. Have you actually fixed the problem from the day before? Have you stood up for yourself? Have you shown up with self-respect? Have you told him that's not allowed? Have you felt heard by him? No. But he made you breakfast in bed, and now this is how our brain works. We've forgotten and we've brushed under the carpet what happened the day before. And this goes on and on and on and on. And before you know it, you don't even recognize yourself in the relationship, and you don't even realize how unhealthy the relationship is and how depleted you are because of it and exhausted you are because of it. We're going to finish there. If you know that you need to do healing work, you know the program for you, Queen Alchemy or the Immersion. We will have the next year immersion tickets dropping for a early bird price in mid-November when we run this immersion. Just FYI, you can join the waitlist so that you don't miss out on that. And of course, you can join Queen Alchemy. If you want a starting point, do the Boundaries Masterclass. That is really going to help you to feel more confident, and also like with withdrawing boundaries and showing up in self-respect, but also it's going to help you to know how to draw boundaries, because that's part of it too. A lot of people, the reason why I initially made this masterclass was because people were like, okay, I get the boundary thing, but like, I actually don't know how to draw a boundary. And my boundaries table that I give you guys in part 2, it is life-changing. I have it myself in my iNotes. My clients have had their lives changed and their embodiment level change from boundaries because of this, because they actually know how to then follow through with the boundary. All right. As usual, please leave a review of the podcast if you haven't already. Share it on Instagram, share it with your friends, especially so that they can have some more long form educational content around unhealthy relationships, as we'll see a lot of it coming through in October in the media for, I would think so anyway, for Domestic Abuse Awareness Month. Hopefully I said that right. And I will see you guys in the next episode.